They were sitting around the dinner table laughing at me like I had just told the funniest joke any of them had ever heard. My sister Patricia, with her perfect blonde hair and her designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent was, actually wiping tears from her eyes. Her husband Marcus, that smug investment banker who drove a BMW and wore a Rolex, was chuckling into his $15 glass of wine. My mother, who I always thought would support me no matter what, was shaking. Her head with that look, that disappointed look that said, "Oh, honey, when will you grow up?" And my father was just staring at his plate, clearly embarrassed that his 29-year-old daughter had just announced she was starting a home baking business, instead of looking for a real job. And there I was sitting at the end of that expensive mahogany table in their expensive suburban house with their expensive everything, trying not to cry, trying to maintain some shred of dignity as my entire family. I treated my dream like it was a child's fantasy, like it was something cute and naive, and ultimately worthless. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old now, and 5 years ago, when I sat at that table being mocked by the people who were supposed to love me, I made myself a promise. I promised that I would prove every single one of them wrong, that I would build something so successful, so undeniable, so impressive that they would have to eat their words and their pride and admit that they had been wrong about me and what happened over those 5 years. What I built from nothing but determination and anger and a borrowed KitchenAid mixer and my grandmother's recipe book would not only prove them wrong, but would actually end up saving their lives, saving their house, saving their entire comfortable existence that they had worked so hard to build and had mocked me for not having. And the irony, the absolute poetic justice of it all is something I think about every single day. Let me take you back to the beginning, before that humiliating dinner, before the laughter, before everything changed. I was 29 years old, working as a receptionist at a dental office, making $28,000 a year, which in Chicago, where I lived, was barely enough to cover rent in a studio apartment with a broken heater and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. No matter how much I cleaned it, I had a bachelor's degree in English literature that had cost me $60,000 in student loans and had qualified me for exactly nothing. Every job I applied to wanted experience. But how do you get experience when no one will hire you without experience? It's a cruel joke that society plays on young people. And I was the punchline. So I answered phones at Dr. Morrison's dental practice. I scheduled root canals and cleanings. I listened to people complain about their insurance. I smiled at patients who treated me like I was invisible, like I was just part of the furniture, and I died a little bit inside every single day. But I had one single thing that made me happy, that made me feel like I was actually good at something, actually capable of creating something beautiful. And that was baking. I had learned to bake. From my grandmother, who had immigrated from Taiwan when she was 20 years old, who had opened a small bakery in Chinatown, who had worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, to support her family, who had taught me that food wasn't just fuel. It was love. It was art. It was a way to bring people together, to create joy, to make someone's day better. She died when I was 18, and I inherited her recipe book. This worn leather notebook filled with recipes, written half in Chinese, half in English, with notes in the margins and stains on the pages, and every time I baked something from that book, I felt close to her, felt like she was standing next to me, guiding my hands, telling me to add a little more sugar, to fold the batter gently, to be patient, to trust the process. And I was good at it, really. Good friends would request my cakes for their birthdays. Co-workers would beg me to bring treats to office parties. I made a 3-tier wedding cake for my college roommate and people. At the reception, were asking for my card, asking if I did this professionally, saying it was better than anything they'd bought at fancy bakeries. And every time someone said that, every time someone told me I should sell my cakes, I would laugh it off, would say, "Oh, it's just a hobby. Just something I do for fun," because I had been taught, like so many of us are taught, that passion doesn't pay bills, that dreams are for children, that adults need real jobs with health insurance and retirement. plans, and predictable paychecks, and so I kept working at that dental office, kept answering phones, kept watching my life slip away, one appointment at a time, until I got fired. It wasn't even for a good reason. Dr. Morrison's daughter had just graduated. College and needed a job. And family comes first. Right? So on a Wednesday afternoon, I was called into his office and told that they were letting me go, that they appreciated my service, that they would give me 2 weeks' pay as severance. And just like that, at 29 years old, I was unemployed with no prospects, no savings, no backup plan, and rent due. In 3 weeks, I spent the first 2 days crying, spent the next week sending out resumes to every job posting I could find: receptionist, administrative assistant, data entry, anything that might pay the bills, and I got nothing. No responses, no interviews, no hope, just the slowly draining bank account and the growing panic that I was going to end up homeless, that I had done everything, right? Had gone to college, had gotten a degree, had worked hard, and it still wasn't enough. And then one night I was baking, because that's what I did. When I was stressed, I was making my grandmother's pineapple cakes, these little pastries with sweet pineapple filling that she used to sell at her bakery. And as I was rolling out the dough, as I was filling each little cake, as I was watching them turn golden brown in the oven, I had this moment of clarity, this sudden realization that I was spending all my energy trying to find another job that would make me miserable when I could be spending that energy building something of my own, something I actually cared about, something that would make me happy. And yes, it was risky. Yes, it was terrifying. Yes, there was a very good chance I would fail, but I was already failing, wasn't I? I was already broke, already unemployed, already at rock bottom. So what did I have to lose? So I made a decision. I took the last $800 in my bank account, and I bought ingredients, I bought cake boxes, I bought business cards, I built a website using a free template that looked only slightly unprofessional. I created an Instagram account and started posting photos of my cakes. I joined every local mom group, every neighborhood Facebook page, every community forum, and I offered my services: custom cakes for any occasion, reasonable prices, fast turnaround. And I waited and waited and waited, and for 3 days nothing happened. And I thought, okay, this was stupid. This was a mistake. I should have just gotten another receptionist job, should have played it safe, should have been realistic. But then I got my first order. A woman named Jennifer wanted a birthday cake for her daughter. Nothing fancy. Just a simple vanilla cake with buttercream frosting and strawberries. She offered me $40, and I said yes. Even though the ingredients cost me $23, even though it took me 4 hours to make, even though I was essentially working for $4 an hour, because it was something, it was a start. It was proof that maybe this could work. I delivered that cake on a Saturday afternoon to a house in the suburbs. And when Jennifer opened the box, her face lit up and she said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." And her daughter, who was turning 7, came running over and started jumping up and down with excitement. And Jennifer took a photo and posted it to her Facebook and tagged me and said, "If you need a cake, you need to call Sarah at Sweet Memories Bakery." And within an hour, I had 3 more orders. And within a week, I had 12. And within a month, I had more orders than I could handle working out of my tiny apartment kitchen. And I realized this might actually work. This might actually be something real. But I made a mistake. I made the mistake of telling my family about it at Sunday dinner at Patricia's house. Patricia, who was a corporate lawyer, who made 6 figures, who lived in a 4-bedroom house in Naperville with her investment banker husband and their 2 perfect children who went to private school. I told them all about my new business, told them about my orders, about my website, about my plans to grow. And that's when the laughter started. Patricia laughed first, that condescending laugh that she had perfected over years of feeling superior to me. "Oh, Sarah," she said, "that's so cute, a little home baking business." And Marcus joined in with his deep, dismissive chuckle. "Honey, that's not a real business. That's a hobby. You can't pay rent with cupcakes." And my mother. Oh, my mother looked at me with such disappointment, such pity, such certainty that I was making a terrible mistake. Sarah, sweetheart, you need to find a real job. This baking thing is fine as a side project, but you need stability, you need benefits, you need a career path. And my father, who had worked at the same accounting firm for 35 years, who had never taken a risk in his entire life, who believed that the only way to live was to find a safe job and stay there until retirement, looked at me and said, "I'm worried about you. Sarah, this is not responsible. This is not how adults behave. You're almost 30. You need to grow up." And I sat there feeling about 2 inches tall, feeling like a child being scolded for having an imagination, feeling like my dream was being crushed in real time by the people who were supposed to support me. And I wanted to defend myself, wanted to explain that I was good at this, that people loved my cakes, that I was building something real, but the words wouldn't come, because some part of me believed them. Some part of me thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am being naive. Maybe this is a stupid idea. Maybe I should just give up and get a real job. But then Patricia said something that changed everything. She said, "You know who you remind me of, Sarah. You remind me of Aunt Linda. Remember her? Remember how she tried to start that jewelry business and it failed, and she ended up bankrupt and had to move in with Grandma? Yeah, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to fail, and then you'll come crying to us to bail you out, and we're supposed to pretend we didn't see this coming." And there was something about the cruelty of that statement, something about the absolute certainty in her voice that I would fail, that flipped a switch inside me. And I looked at her, at all of them, and I said, "You know what? You're right. Maybe I will fail. Maybe this is a stupid idea. Maybe I'm being naive, but at least I'm trying. At least I'm building something. At least I'm chasing something I care about instead of just collecting a paycheck and pretending that makes me better than everyone else." And then I stood up and I walked out, and I didn't talk to any of them for 3 months. And those 3 months were the hardest months of my life. I worked 18-hour days baking cakes until 3 in the morning, getting up at 6 to make deliveries, then coming home to start baking again. My apartment was constantly covered in flour and sugar. My hands were perpetually stained with food coloring. I had burns on my arms from the oven. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept more than 4 hours. I lived on coffee and leftover cake scraps and pure, stubborn determination because I was not going to let Patricia be right. I was not going to be Aunt Linda. I was not going to fail and come crawling back to them. I would rather die than give them that satisfaction. And slowly things started to change. I got better at pricing my cakes. I learned to charge what I was worth. Instead of undervaluing my work, I invested in better equipment, a professional stand mixer, a convection oven that I bought used on Craigslist, better quality ingredients, better packaging. I started saying no to customers who wanted elaborate cakes but only wanted to pay $20. I started requiring deposits. I started booking out weeks in advance, and the orders kept coming and coming and coming, because people loved my cakes, loved the flavors, loved the designs, loved that I actually listened to what they wanted, instead of trying to force them into some standard template. And word of mouth is powerful. Word of mouth in the age of Instagram and Facebook is incredibly powerful. Every cake I delivered turned into 3 more orders. Every satisfied customer turned into 5 new customers, and my little hobby that my family had laughed at was becoming a real business. By month 6, I was making as much as I had at the dental office. By month 9, I was making double. By month 12, I was making more money than I had ever made in my life, and I was doing it by baking cakes, by doing something I loved, by building something with my own hands. And yes, it was hard. Yes, I was tired. Yes, there were moments when I questioned everything, when I wondered if it would be easier to just get a regular job. But then I would get a message from a bride saying my wedding cake was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, or a parent saying their child cried happy. Tears when they saw their birthday cake, or someone saying, "I don't even like cake, but yours is incredible." And those messages, those moments of connection, those pieces of evidence that I was making people happy, kept me going, kept me baking, kept me building. I still hadn't talked to my family. They would call occasionally, my mother leaving voicemails asking if I had come to my senses. Yet if I had found a real job, Patricia sending texts saying she hoped I was doing okay, really hoping I hadn't. Gotten myself into too much trouble. My father sending me job postings for receptionist positions like that was helpful. Like that was support, and I ignored all of it because I didn't need their support, didn't need their approval, didn't need their validation. I was building something real, something valuable, something that was mine, and their opinions didn't matter anymore. And then something happened that changed everything. I got a call from a wedding planner named Amanda. She worked with high-end clients, wealthy clients, people who didn't ask about prices because price wasn't a concern. And she had seen my work on Instagram and wanted to know if I could make a cake for one of her clients, a 6-tier cake for a wedding at the Chicago Botanic Garden with sugar flowers and gold leaf and intricate piping, the kind of cake that would be photographed for magazines. The kind of cake that would establish me as a serious baker, and the budget, she said, was $25,000. $25,000 for one cake, more than I used to make in a year, and I said yes. Even though my hands were shaking, even though I wasn't entirely sure I could do it, even though the pressure was enormous, because this was my chance, this was the opportunity. That could take my business to the next level. I spent 2 weeks working on that cake, planning every detail, practicing techniques, researching sugar flour construction, watching YouTube videos at 2 a.m, taking notes, obsessing over every element. And when the day came to deliver it, when I set it up at the venue, when I stepped back and saw it standing there, 6 tiers of buttercream and fondant, covered in handmade sugar roses and peonies, and ranunculus with delicate gold leaf accents. Catching the light, I cried because I had done it. I had created something beautiful, something worthy of this space, this moment, this occasion. And when the bride saw it, she cried too. And when the guests started arriving, they gathered around it, taking photos, gasping at the details. And Amanda, the wedding planner, pulled me aside and said, "Sarah, this is the most beautiful wedding cake I have ever seen in 15 years of doing this. I have never seen anything like it. And I need you to work with me on all my weddings." And just like that, everything changed. Amanda referred me to other wedding planners, who referred me to event coordinators, who referred me to corporate clients. And suddenly, I wasn't just making birthday cakes for neighborhood kids. I was making cakes for weddings at the Four Seasons, for corporate events, for charity galas, for clients who had budgets that seemed unlimited, and my prices went up and up and up because I could charge what I was worth, because I was good, really good, because my cakes weren't just desserts. They were centerpieces, they were art, they were conversation pieces, they were Instagram moments, and people would pay premium prices for that. I had to move out of my apartment kitchen. Obviously, I couldn't legally run a commercial baking business from my home anyway. So I found a small commercial kitchen space in a not great neighborhood, cheap rent, but enough room for me to work, to store ingredients, to actually have space to create. And I hired my first employee, a culinary school student named Maria, who needed experience and was willing to work for minimum wage and learn everything I could teach her. And then I hired another employee and another, and within 2 years of starting my business, I had 5 employees, a waiting list 3 months long, and an annual revenue that was approaching $500,000. $500,000 from baking cakes, from doing what my family had laughed at, from what they had called a hobby, from what they had been certain would end in failure. And I thought about them often, thought about Patricia's condescending laugh, thought about Marcus saying, "You can't pay rent with cupcakes," thought about my mother's disappointment, thought about my father calling me irresponsible, and I smiled because I was proving them wrong every single day, with every cake I made, with every check I deposited, with every satisfied customer, with every 5-star review, with every magazine feature, with every morning news segment where they invited me to demonstrate cake decorating. With every moment of success, I was proving them wrong, and it felt incredible. I still didn't talk to them, still didn't reach out, still held on to that anger, that resentment, that need to prove myself. And maybe that was petty. Maybe I should have been the bigger person. But I wasn't ready. I was still too angry, too hurt, too determined to succeed on my own, without their support, without their approval, without their validation. And, honestly, I didn't need them anymore. Didn't need their conditional love. Didn't need to perform for their approval. Didn't need to be the disappointment at family dinners. I had built my own life, my own success, my own family of employees and customers, and people who believed in me, and that was enough. Until I got a call from my mother on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer because we still weren't really talking. But something made me pick up, and my mother's voice on the other end was shaking, was breaking, was desperate. "Sarah," she said, "I know we haven't talked much. I know things have been difficult between us, but I need to talk to you. It's about Patricia and Marcus. They're in trouble." And I could hear her crying, could hear the fear in her voice. And despite everything, despite all the hurt and anger, I said what happened. "Tell me what's going on." And my mother told me everything. Told me that Marcus had lost his job at the investment bank. Told me that it had happened 6 months ago, and he hadn't told. Anyone had been pretending to go to work every day, had been secretly applying for jobs, but couldn't find anything that paid. What he had been making told me that they had burned through their savings, trying to maintain their lifestyle, trying to keep up appearances, trying to avoid admitting that they were struggling. Told me that they had maxed out their credit cards, had taken out loans, had remortgaged their house, and now the bank was foreclosing. Told me that they had 60 days to come, up with $85,000, or they would lose everything. Their house, their cars, their children's school, their entire comfortable existence would be gone. And I sat there in my commercial kitchen, surrounded by the success I had built, surrounded by proof that I had been right and they had been wrong. And I felt a lot of things. I felt vindicated because this was karma. This was justice. This was proof that their perfect life, their judgmental superiority, their certainty that they were better than me had all been built on sand, had all been one job loss away from collapse. I felt satisfied in a dark, petty way because Patricia, who had laughed at me, who had compared me to Aunt Linda, who had been so certain I would fail, was now the one. Facing failure was now the one who would have to admit she wasn't as successful as she pretended. I felt angry. Because where was this humility 3 years ago? Where was this vulnerability when I was struggling? Where was their support when I needed it? And I felt sad, because despite everything, Patricia was my sister. Despite her cruelty, her judgment, her condescension, she was family, and I didn't want to see her lose everything. Didn't want to see my niece and nephew have to leave their school, have to move, have to face the kind of instability and insecurity that I had lived with for years. So I asked my mother, what exactly do they need? And she said, the $85,000 for the foreclosure. If they can come up with that, they can keep the house. And Marcus is still looking for work, and they can figure out the rest. But without that, they lose everything. And Sarah, I know I have no right to ask. I know we haven't supported you. I know we've been awful. But you're her sister. You're family. And I don't know where else to turn. We can't come up with that kind of money. And if you have any way to help, even just a loan, even just something to buy them more time, I would never ask if it wasn't desperate, if there was any other option. But there isn't, Sarah. There really isn't. And I told my mother. I would think about it. I would call her back, and I hung up, and I sat there in my kitchen, and I thought about everything. I thought about that dinner 3 years ago. I thought about the laughter. I thought about Patricia saying I would fail. I thought about all the times they had made me feel small, made me feel like my dreams didn't matter, made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And I thought about walking away, about letting them face the consequences of their choices, about letting Patricia learn what it felt like to lose everything, to have people judge you, to have no safety net. And part of me wanted them to suffer, wanted them to understand what I had gone through. But I also thought about my grandmother, about how she had always said, family is everything, about how she had worked so hard to provide for her family, to give them opportunities, to make sure they never went hungry, never went homeless, about how she would have done anything for her family, even the ones who didn't deserve it, even the ones who had hurt her, even the ones who had disappointed her. Because that's what family means. That's what love means. That's what being a good person means. So I called my accountant and I asked him how much money I had available, how much I could access without hurting the business. And he told me I had about $90,000 in savings that I had been planning to use. To open a storefront, to expand, to hire more staff, to take the business to the next level, and I told him I needed to wire $85,000 of it, and he asked if I was sure, and I said, yes, I'm sure. And then I called my mother back, and I said, I'll give them the money, and my mother started crying, started thanking me, started saying she couldn't believe it, couldn't believe I would do this after everything. And I said, I have conditions, and she said, anything. You want, I said first. Patricia needs to call me herself. She needs to ask me directly. She needs to look me in the eye, virtually at least, and admit that she needs my help, that she was wrong about me, that my little hobby is the only thing standing between her and homelessness. And my mother agreed. Second, I said, they pay me back. Not the money, I don't need the money back. But they pay me back by being better, by being family, by actually treating me like I matter, like my choices matter, like my life has value. And my mother said yes, of course. And third, I said, no more judgment, no more condescension, no more treating anyone's dreams like they're worthless, no more laughing at people for trying, no more being cruel to people who are struggling. And my mother promised, she said, we will all be better. We will all do better. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. You're saving us. You're saving Patricia. You're saving the kids. And 2 days later, Patricia called me. I could hear it in her voice, how hard it was for her to make. This call, how much it was killing her pride, how humiliating it was to ask her little sister, the one she had mocked, the one she had been certain would fail for help, Sarah. She said, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to ask. I spent my whole life being the successful one, being the one who had it together, being the one everyone was proud of. And now I'm calling you, begging you to save me. And I know I don't deserve it. I know I was awful to you. I know I laughed at your dreams and told you you would fail. And I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. You built something amazing, something real, and I was too arrogant to see it, too insecure to admit that maybe your way was just as valid as mine, maybe more valid because you're actually happy, and I haven't been happy in years. I've been stressed and anxious and terrified that someone would find out we were struggling, that someone would see through the facade, and now everyone's going to know, everyone's going to see, that we're not as perfect as we pretended. And I'm scared, Sarah. I'm so scared of losing everything. And I could hear her crying, real crying. Not the delicate tears she used to cry at movies, but deep, ugly sobs. And part of me wanted to let her suffer. Wanted to make her beg. Wanted to punish her for every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every moment she made me feel less than. But I didn't, because I'm not that person, because holding on to anger was poison, was turning me into someone I didn't want to be. Because my grandmother wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have punished someone for being vulnerable, for admitting they were wrong, for asking for help. So I said, Patricia, I'll give you the money. I'll wire it today. You can save your house. But I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean everything is fine. This doesn't erase what you did, what you said, how you made me feel. We have a lot to work through, a lot to rebuild. But you're my sister. And I love you, even when I'm angry at you, even when you hurt me, and I'm not going to let you lose everything. I'm not going to let my niece and nephew suffer because of adult mistakes, so I'm going to help you. But you need to get help too, real help. You need to talk to someone about the pressure you're under, the anxiety, the need to appear perfect. You need to figure out what actually makes you happy, not what looks good to other people. And Patricia said, I promise I will thank you, Sarah. I don't know how to thank you. wired the money that afternoon, $85,000, that I had earned by baking cakes, by doing the thing they had laughed at, by building the business they had dismissed as a hobby. And when Patricia called to confirm she had received it, when she told me the bank had accepted the payment, when she said they got to keep their house, she broke down crying again and said, "This is so humiliating. Sarah, do you know how humiliating this is, that my little sister had to save me, that you were the one with the money, the one with the successful business, the one who actually had her life together while I was falling apart?" And I said, "Patricia, this isn't about humiliation. This is about family. This is about being there for each other. Even when it's hard, even when pride gets in the way, even when we've hurt each other." And she said, "I know. But I need you to understand. I need you to know that I see you. Now I see what you built. I see how wrong I was, and I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." Word spread through the family. Of course it had to. My mother told my father. My father told his brother, Patricia, told her friends, who told their friends, and suddenly everyone knew that Sarah, the daughter who had been directionless, the sister who had been mocked, the niece who had been pitied, had saved Patricia and Marcus from foreclosure with money she made from her little home baking business, and the dynamic shifted completely. My father called me, apologizing, saying he should have believed in me, should have supported me, saying he was proud. My mother called, saying she had been wrong to worry, to doubt, to push me toward conventional success. Patricia called regularly, now actually asking about my life, actually interested in my business, actually being a real sister. Marcus sent me a long email thanking me, apologizing for his condescension, offering to help with financial planning if I ever needed it. And their friends started ordering cakes from me, started telling other people, started referring their wealthy friends who could afford my premium prices. But here's what's interesting. Here's what I didn't expect. The satisfaction of proving them wrong lasted about 2 days, maybe 3, and then it faded. It became just another thing that happened, just another milestone, just another moment. And what didn't fade, what actually grew stronger, was the satisfaction of helping them, of being able to be there when they needed me, of being the person who could save the day. Not because I wanted to gloat, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I could, because I had built something that gave me the resources to help my family in a real tangible way. And that felt better than any vindication, any "I told you so," any moment of smug superiority could ever feel. Patricia and Marcus didn't lose their house. Marcus eventually found a new job, not as prestigious, not as high-paying, but he said it was better. Said the old job had been killing him. Slowly. Said the pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle had been suffocating. Said losing everything or almost losing everything had given him perspective, had helped him understand what actually mattered. And Patricia went back to therapy, dealt with her anxiety, dealt with her need for external validation, dealt with her tendency to judge others as a way of feeling better about herself. And she became different, softer, more real, more willing to admit when she was struggling, more willing to ask for help, more willing to be vulnerable. And our relationship changed, became actual sisters, became friends, became people who supported each other instead of competed with each other. And my parents changed too. They started telling people about my business with real pride. Not embarrassment, not apology, but genuine pride in what I had accomplished. They started referring their friends to me, started showing up at my commercial kitchen to see where I worked, started asking about my plans for expansion, about hiring, about whether I was happy. And that last question, whether I was happy, was new, was something they had never asked before, because they had assumed that happiness came from conventional success, from prestigious jobs, from impressive titles, from looking good to others. But they were learning that happiness looks different for different people. That success isn't one size fits all, that their definition of a good life wasn't the only definition. My business continued to grow. I opened a storefront, eventually a beautiful space in Lincoln Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows, A display case full of cakes and pastries, tables where people could sit and have coffee, and Cake a Teaching Kitchen where I started offering decorating classes, and the day I opened that storefront, my entire family showed up. Patricia and Marcus and their kids, my parents, my aunts and uncles, people who had doubted me, who had laughed at me, who had been certain I would fail, all standing there with tears in their eyes telling me how proud they were. And I cried too, because this was what I had wanted all along. Not their regret, not their apologies, but their genuine pride, their real support, their understanding that I had done something meaningful, something valuable, something worth celebrating. I hired more staff, eventually had 15 employees running 2 shifts handling weddings and corporate events and wholesale orders to coffee shops and restaurants. I got featured in Food and Wine magazine, in the Chicago Tribune, and Bon Appetit. I appeared on morning shows, demonstrating techniques, talking about my grandmother, talking about building a business from nothing, talking about following your passion, even when everyone tells you you're crazy. And every time I did an interview, every time I told my story, I made sure to mention the dinner where my family laughed at me, not to shame them, not to hold it over them, but to show other people that everyone starts somewhere, that everyone faces doubt, that everyone has people who don't believe in them, and that's okay, because you don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself. And here's what else happened. Here's the part I didn't expect. Patricia started baking. She started taking my classes, started learning techniques, started getting good at it. And she told me that when everything fell apart, when she almost lost her house, when she had to admit she wasn't perfect, she realized she had been living someone else's life, had been chasing someone else's definition of success, had been trying to prove something to people whose opinions didn't matter. And watching me build something I loved, something that made me happy, something that was authentically mine, had shown her a different path, had given her permission to want something different. So she started baking, started small, just for her kids, then for their school, then for friends. And she said, "I'm not going to quit my job. I like being a lawyer. But this makes me happy in a way work never has. This gives me something that's just mine, something I create, something that brings people joy. And I understand now. I understand why you fought so hard for this, why you were willing to risk everything." My niece Emma, who was 10 years old, started spending weekends at my bakery, learning to bake, asking questions, watching me work. And she told me, "Aunt Sarah, I want to be like you. When I grow up, I want to build something that makes people happy." And my heart exploded, because this kid who I had watched grow up, who I loved more than almost anything, was being taught by her mother that success looks like prestigious jobs and big houses and impressing people. But now she was learning something different. She was learning that success looks like passion, looks like creating, looks like doing something you love, looks like making a difference in people's lives, even if that difference is just making them smile when they see a beautiful cake. 5 years after that dinner where everyone laughed at me, I hosted my own dinner at my apartment, which was bigger now, nicer now, in a better neighborhood, because my business was successful enough that I could afford a 2-bedroom with a real kitchen and a view of the lake. I invited my whole family, and I made dinner myself. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and vegetables and salad, and for dessert, I made a cake, a 3-tier cake decorated with sugar flowers with a fondant banner that said, "Dreams do come true." And when everyone saw it, Patricia started crying and said, "Sarah, this is beautiful." And I said, "It should be. I've had a lot of practice." And everyone laughed, but it was different laughter. It was warm laughter. It was laughter with me, not at me. And Patricia said, "I need to say something. I need everyone to hear this. 5 years ago, we all sat at my table and laughed at Sarah. We told her she was being naive, told her she needed a real job, told her she would fail, and we were wrong. We were so incredibly wrong. Sarah built something amazing, something that not only proved us wrong, but actually saved our family, saved our house, gave us a second chance, and I will never stop being grateful, and I will never stop being sorry for doubting you, for laughing at you, for making you feel like your dreams didn't matter. Because they did. They do. And I love you." And my mother said, I'm sorry too, Sarah. We should have supported. You should have believed in you, should have been proud. From the beginning, and my father said, I spent my whole life playing it safe, taking the secure path, and I thought that's what you should do too, but I was wrong. You showed me that sometimes the risky path is the right path. Sometimes following your passion is more valuable than following conventional wisdom. And I'm proud of you, so incredibly proud. And Marcus said, you saved us, Sarah, not just financially, but in every way that matters. You showed us what actually matters, what's actually worth fighting for, and we won't forget that. And my niece Emma said, Aunt Sarah, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you. And I looked around at my family, at these people who had hurt me, who had doubted me, who had eventually come around and supported me, and I realized this was success, not the money, not the featured articles, not the prestigious clients, but these relationships, these connections, this love, even when it's complicated, even when it's hard, even when people make mistakes, because family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about being there. It's about forgiving and growing and supporting each other through everything. So if you're watching this and you have a dream that people are laughing at, if you have a passion that people dismiss as unrealistic, if you have an idea that everyone tells you will fail, I want you to know something. Those people are wrong. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't love you, but because they can't see what you see. They can't imagine what you can build. They're projecting their own fears, their own limitations, their own definition of success onto you, and you don't have to accept that. You don't have to let their doubt become your doubt. You don't have to let their fear stop you from trying. And yes, it will be hard. Yes, there will be moments when you want to quit, when you wonder if everyone was right, when you question everything. But there will also be moments of pure joy, moments when you create something beautiful, when you help someone, when you realize you're building the life you actually want to live. And those moments make everything worth it. And here's the secret. Here's what I learned the hard way. Proving people wrong feels good for about 5 minutes, and then it's over. And what lasts, what actually matters, is building something you're proud of, is doing work you love, is living authentically, is being true to yourself, even when it's hard, even when people doubt you, even when the safe path seems easier, because at the end of your life, you won't care about who believed in you or who doubted you. You'll care about whether you had the courage to try, whether you lived fully, whether you built something meaningful, whether you made a difference, and I did. I built a business that makes people happy, that gives me joy, that supports my employees, that saved my family, and that's everything. That's success. That's what matters. That's what I'll remember when I'm old. My family laughed when I started baking until my cakes paid for their house. And yes, there's satisfaction in that. Yes, there's vindication. But the real story isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. The real story is about a woman who lost her job, who had a choice to play it safe or take a risk, who decided to bet on herself even when no one else would, and built something beautiful, something meaningful, something that changed not just her life, but her entire family's understanding of what success means. And here's what I want you to understand. Here's why I'm sharing this story. It's not to brag about my success. It's not to shame my family. It's not to say that everyone should quit their job and start a bakery, because that would be stupid. That's not realistic for everyone. But what I am saying is that if you have something inside you, something that makes you come alive, something you're passionate about, something you dream about, you owe it to yourself to at least try. You owe it to yourself to give it a real shot, not a half-hearted attempt, not something you do on the side while focusing most of your energy on the safe option, but a real full commitment. Even if it's scary, even if people doubt you, even if the odds seem stacked against you, because the regret of not trying is so much worse than the disappointment of trying and failing. I think about alternate timelines. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had listened to my family, if I had gotten another receptionist job, if I had played it safe, if I had dismissed my baking as just a hobby, and I know exactly what would have happened. I would be sitting in another office, answering another phone, scheduling another appointment, dying inside a little more each day, wondering what if, wondering what I could have built, wondering if I had what it took to make it work, and that wondering that not knowing would have eaten me alive, would have poisoned every moment, would have turned into bitterness and resentment and a deep soul-crushing regret. And I'm so grateful I didn't have to live that alternate timeline, so grateful I took the risk, so grateful I bet on myself. Now, I'm not going to lie and say it's all been perfect, that there haven't been hard moments, because there have been so many hard moments, more than I can count. There was the time a bride called me 3 days before her wedding, saying she had changed. Her mind about the design wanted something completely different, and I had to remake the entire cake in 72 hours, barely sleeping, barely eating, just baking and decorating and praying I could pull it off. There was the time one of my employees quit with no notice right before Valentine's Day, which is one of our busiest times, and I had to work 36 hours straight to fill all the orders. There was the time my oven broke 2 hours before I was supposed to deliver a cake for a corporate event, and I had to rush to a friend's house, use her oven finish baking there, and barely made it to the delivery on time. There was the time I got food poisoning the day before a huge wedding and had to work through it, had to keep baking, keep decorating, while running to the bathroom every 20 minutes. There was the time a customer left me a 1-star review saying my cake tasted like cardboard, even though 20 other people at the same event said it was the best cake they'd ever had. But that one review, that one person's opinion, haunted me for weeks, made me question everything, made me wonder if I was actually good or if everyone had just been being nice. There was the time I had to let go of an employee I really liked because they kept showing up late, kept making mistakes, kept costing me more money than they were worth. And having that conversation, having to fire someone who needed the job, who had bills to pay, who had kids to feed, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There was the time my commercial kitchen flooded because of a burst pipe, and I lost $10,000 worth of ingredients and supplies and had to cancel 3 weeks of orders and refund deposits and deal with angry customers who didn't care about my problems, just wanted their cakes. There were countless times when I made mistakes. Burned cakes, dropped cakes, used salt instead of sugar. Forgot to order ingredients, ran out of boxes, showed up to the wrong address, delivered cakes that weren't perfect, that had flaws that I could see, even if the customers couldn't. And every single one of those mistakes felt like proof that maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe my family had been right. Maybe I was in over my head. Maybe I should give up. But I didn't give up. Because here's what I learned about running your own business, about chasing your dreams, about building something from nothing. It's not about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about how you respond. When things go wrong, it's about problem solving. It's about resilience. It's about getting knocked down and getting back up and figuring out how to do better next time. And the thing is, when you work for someone else, when you have a regular job, mistakes feel different. They feel less personal because it's not your business, not your reputation, not your dream on the line. But when it's your own business, every mistake feels catastrophic. Every problem feels like it might be the thing that destroys everything you've built, and you have to learn to manage that anxiety, that fear, that constant low-level panic that something will go wrong and you won't be able to fix it. You have to learn to trust yourself, to trust that you can handle whatever comes up, to trust that you're capable and resourceful and strong enough to survive the hard moments. And that trust, that belief in yourself, that's not something you're born with. That's something you build one difficult situation at a time, one problem solved at a time, one day survived at a time. There were also beautiful moments, so many beautiful moments that made all the hard stuff worth it. There was the bride who hugged me and cried when she saw her wedding cake and said, "You made my dream come true." There was the mother who ordered a birthday cake for her son, who had autism, who was obsessed with trains, and I made this elaborate train cake with fondant tracks and edible smoke, and the kid's face when he saw it, the pure joy, the excitement, the way he stimmed with happiness, is something I will never forget. There was the woman who ordered a cake for her mother's 80th birthday, who told me her mother had dementia and barely recognized anyone anymore. But when she saw the cake, which was decorated to look like her childhood home, she smiled and said home, and it was the first word she had spoken in months. There was the couple who had lost their daughter to cancer, and on what would have been her 16th birthday. They ordered a cake decorated with butterflies because their daughter had loved butterflies, and they said, "This cake is the only way we can celebrate her now, the only way we can mark that she existed, that she mattered, and being part of." That moment, being trusted with that grief, that love, that memory was an honor, was something sacred, was something that reminded me that what I do isn't just about cake, isn't just about making pretty things. It's about being part of people's lives, being part of their celebrations, their grief, their milestones, their memories. And that matters. That means something that's worth more than any paycheck I ever received at a regular job. There was the day I got to hire Maria, full-time, got to give her a real salary with benefits, got to tell her she didn't have to worry about finding another job, that she had a future here, and she cried and said, "You changed my life. Sarah, you gave me a chance when no one else would, and now I have a career. I have something I'm good at. I have stability and pride and purpose, and I realized that building my business wasn't just about me anymore, wasn't just about proving people wrong or following my passion. It was about creating opportunities for other people, about giving them what someone should have given me, a chance to do something meaningful, to build skills, to have a future." There was the day I got a message from a woman who said, "I saw your interview where you talked about starting your business after being laid off. And I just got laid off too. And I've been so depressed, so hopeless, feeling like my life is over. But hearing your story gave me hope, gave me permission to try something different, to chase something I've always wanted. And I just wanted to say thank you." And I realized that sharing my story, being vulnerable about the struggles, being honest about the fear and doubt and hard times, wasn't just cathartic for me, it was helpful for other people, was giving them courage, was showing them a different path. And that responsibility, that opportunity to inspire others, became part of my mission, became part of why I kept going, kept pushing, kept building. And there was the day about 2 years after I gave Patricia the money when she called me and said, "I have a surprise for you. Come over to my house." And when I got there, she handed me an envelope. And inside was a check for $85,000, the full amount I had given them. And I said, "Patricia, you don't have to do this. I told you I didn't need the money back." And she said, "I know you didn't need it, but I needed to give it to you. I needed to pay you back. Not just the money, but the faith you had in me, the grace you showed me, the love you demonstrated when I didn't deserve it. And more than that, I want you to use this money to grow your business, to open another location, to do whatever you've been dreaming about, because you saved us, Sarah. And now I want to invest in you. I want to be part of what you're building. I want to support your dreams the way you supported us." And I cried, because this was full circle, because this was healing, because this was proof that people can change, that relationships can be repaired, that families can grow and evolve and become better. And I took that money, and I did open a second location in the suburbs near where Patricia lived. And I made her a partner, gave her a small ownership stake, because she had earned it, because she had grown, because she had become the sister I always wanted. And on opening day, she was there, cutting the ribbon alongside me. Both of us crying, both of us laughing, both of us marveling at how far we had come from that dinner table, where she had laughed at my dreams, to this moment where she was helping me achieve them. And that felt better than any vindication, any "I told you so," any moment of proving her wrong could ever feel, because this was love, this was family, this was what actually mattered. I've been running my business for 5 years now, and it's grown beyond anything I imagined when I started. I have 2 locations, 15 employees, annual revenue over $1 million. I've been featured in national magazines, have done segments on the Food Network, have had celebrities order cakes from me, have built something that's respected, recognized, successful by any definition. And yes, I'm proud of that. Yes, it feels good. Yes, there's satisfaction in having built something substantial, something real, something valuable, but you want to know what I'm most proud of. It's not the revenue, it's not the press, it's not the celebrity clients. It's the fact that I love what I do. It's the fact that I wake up excited to work. It's the fact that my employees love their jobs. It's the fact that I'm making people happy every single day. It's the fact that I followed my passion and it led me to a life that's fulfilling, meaningful, joyful. It's the fact that I took a risk when everyone told me not to, and it paid off. Not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, in every way that actually matters. And I'm proud that I was able to help my family, that when they needed me, I showed up, that I didn't hold grudges, didn't punish them, didn't make them suffer, didn't lord my success over them, but instead demonstrated grace, demonstrated love, demonstrated that being right isn't as important as being kind. And I think that's the real lesson here. That's what I want people to take away from this story. Yes, chase your dreams. Yes, prove people wrong. Yes, build something you're proud of. But also, be gracious in victory. Be kind when you're proven, right? Be generous with your success. Be willing to help the people who doubted you. Because that's what separates success from true fulfillment. That's what turns achievement into meaning. That's what makes a good life into a great life. Grandmother used to say the best revenge is living well, and she was right. But I would add to that. I would say the best revenge is living well, and then using your success to lift up the people who doubted you, because that changes you. That makes you better, that prevents success from turning you into someone bitter, someone cruel, someone who uses their achievements as a weapon instead of a gift. And I want to be the kind of successful person who opens doors for others, who creates opportunities, who inspires, who helps, who gives back, who remembers what it felt like to struggle, and uses that memory to be kinder, more generous, more understanding. So here's my challenge to you. If you're watching this, if you're at a crossroads, if you're deciding between the safe path and the risky one, if you have a dream that people are laughing at, if you have a passion that people dismiss, I want you to ask yourself one question. Not will I succeed? Not what if I fail? Not what will people think? But what? Will I regret more trying and failing or never trying at all? Because I can tell you from experience, failure is temporary. Failure is survivable failure. Teaches you things you can't learn any other way but regret. Regret lasts forever. Regret poisons. Everything regret turns into bitterness and what-ifs, and a deep soul-aching sense that you missed your chance, that you played it too safe, that you let fear or other people's opinions dictate your life, and you don't get that time back. You don't get a do-over. You don't get to go back and take the risk. You were too afraid to take, and I'm not saying everyone should quit their job and start a business. That's not realistic. That's not smart for everyone. But what I am saying is that you should give your dreams a real chance. You should take them seriously. You should invest time and energy and resources into exploring whether they're viable, whether they could work, whether you could build something meaningful. And if you try and it doesn't work, if you give it your all and it still fails, then at least, at least you tried. At least you don't have to spend the rest of your life wondering what if. But if you don't try, if you let fear or doubt or other people's opinions stop you from even attempting it, you're guaranteeing failure, you're guaranteeing regret, you're guaranteeing that you'll always wonder what could have been. And here's something else I've learned. Success doesn't look like what you think it's going to look. Like when I started my business, I thought success would be making 6 figures, thought it would be getting press coverage, thought it would be having multiple locations, thought it would be proving my family wrong. And yes, all of those things happened. And yes, they felt good. But you know what? Success actually is. Success is going to bed at night, feeling fulfilled. Success is waking up in the morning, excited about your day. Success is doing work that aligns with your values. Success is having control over your time. Success is building something you're proud of. Success is making a difference in people's lives. Success is living authentically. Success is being true to yourself, even when it's hard. And all of those things are available to everyone, regardless of revenue, regardless of press, regardless of what anyone else thinks. They're internal measures. They're about how you feel about your life, not how your life looks to others. And that's what I want people to understand. That's the real message of this story. My family laughed when I started baking. They thought I was being naive, thought I would fail, thought I needed to get a real job, and they were wrong, and yes, I proved them wrong. Yes, my cakes literally paid for their house. Yes, there's poetic justice in that. But more importantly, I proved myself. Right. I proved that I was capable, that I could build something, that I could trust my instincts, that I could survive the hard times, that I could turn my passion into something sustainable, something valuable, something that matters. And that self-belief, that self-knowledge, that self-confidence is worth more than any amount of money, more than any external validation, more than any "I told you." So because it's permanent, because it's unshakable, because it's mine, and no one can take it away. And now, 5 years later, I have a business. I love a family that supports me, employees who depend on me, customers who trust me, a life that feels authentic, that feels fulfilling, that feels like mine. And every single day when I'm decorating a cake, when I'm piping buttercream flowers, when I'm constructing a 5-tier wedding cake, when I'm teaching a class, when I'm hiring a new employee, when I'm planning an expansion, I think about my grandmother. I think about how she would be proud. I think about how she built something from nothing too. How she took a risk, how she followed her passion, how she made people happy through food, through love, through creating beautiful things. And I'm carrying on her legacy. I'm honoring her memory. I'm living proof that her recipes, her techniques, her values, her belief that food is love can be passed down, can be built upon, can be turned into something bigger, something that impacts more. People, something that creates opportunities and joy and connection. And I think about that dinner 5 years ago. I think about the laughter. I think about how small I felt, how humiliated, how certain they all were that I would fail, and I don't feel angry anymore, don't feel resentful, don't feel the need to prove anything. Because I already did. I already proved everything I needed to prove, not to them, but to myself. And now I just feel grateful. Grateful that their doubt gave me fuel. Grateful that their laughter gave me determination. Grateful that their certainty I would fail made me more determined to succeed. Grateful that I had the courage to try. Grateful that I didn't let their fear become my fear. Grateful that I built this life, this business, this success, this fulfillment. So to everyone watching, to everyone who has a dream that people are laughing at, to everyone who's been told to be realistic, to get a real job, to play it safe, to stop dreaming, I want you to know something. Those people who are laughing, they're not laughing because your dream is stupid. They're laughing because your dream scares them, because it reminds them of the dreams they gave up on, because it challenges their choices, their safe, predictable, comfortable lives, because if you succeed, if you actually build something meaningful from following your passion, it means they could have too. It means they gave up too easily. It means they let fear win, and that's uncomfortable. That's threatening. That's scary. So they laugh, they dismiss, they tell you it won't work. Because if you don't try, if you give up, then they don't have to confront their own cowardice, their own regrets, their own missed opportunities. But you don't have to let their fear stop you. You don't have to let their limitations become your limitations. You don't have to accept their definition of success or security or what's possible. You can choose differently. You can take the risk. You can chase the dream. You can build something beautiful. And yes, it will be hard. Yes, there will be moments of doubt. Yes, you might fail, but you also might succeed. You also might build something amazing. You also might change your life, your family, your entire trajectory. And isn't that possibility? Isn't that chance worth the risk, worth the effort, worth the fear, worth the doubt, worth the hard work? Because the alternative, the safe path, the conventional choice, the playing it small. That's not really safety. That's just a slower, more predictable kind of failure that's dying a little. Bit every day at a job you hate, that's living for the weekend, that's counting down the years until retirement, that's looking back at the end of your life and wondering, what if? Wondering what you could have built. Wondering if you had what it took, and never knowing. Never having the courage to find out. I chose differently. I took the risk. I chased the dream. I built the business. I proved everyone wrong, including myself and my life. Now is so much better than I ever imagined. Not because I'm rich, not because I'm famous, not because I have some impressive title, but because I'm happy, because I'm fulfilled, because I'm doing what I love, because I'm making a difference, because I'm living authentically, because I wake up every day grateful for the life I've built, and that is success. That is what winning looks like. That is what everyone is actually searching for, even if they don't know it, even if they've been taught to measure success in dollars and titles and possessions. What everyone actually wants is to feel alive, is to feel purposeful, is to feel like their life matters, and you can have that. You can build that. You can create that. But you have to be willing to take the risk. You have to be willing to ignore the doubters. You have to be willing to work harder than you've ever worked. You have to be willing to fail and get back up. You have to be willing to bet on yourself when no one else will. My family laughed when I started baking until my cakes paid for their house. And that story, that journey, that transformation from being mocked to being the hero is satisfying, is validating, is exactly the kind of underdog story that everyone loves. But the real story, the deeper truth, is that I didn't do this to prove them wrong. I did it to prove myself right. I did it because I believed in myself, because I trusted my instincts, because I refused to let other people's limitations define my possibilities. And that belief, that self-trust, that refusal to play small, that's available to everyone. That's not some special gift. That's not some rare talent. That's just courage. That's just determination. That's just the willingness to try. And if I can do it, if someone who got fired from a receptionist job, who had no business experience, who had no safety net, who had everyone telling her she was making a mistake, if that person can build $1 million business, then you can too. You can build whatever it is you're dreaming about. You can turn your passion into your career. You can create a life you actually love, but you have to start. You have to take the first step. You have to stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting until you're ready, because you'll never feel ready, because there will always be reasons not to try. Because fear will always have 1,000 perfectly logical arguments for why you should play it safe. But courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage means you're terrified, and you do it anyway. Courage means you take the leap. Even when you can't see the net, courage means you bet on yourself, even when the odds seem impossible. And I'm living proof that courage pays off, that taking risks leads to rewards, that following your passion can lead to success, not just financial success, but the kind of success that actually matters. The kind that makes you happy, that makes your life meaningful, that makes you proud of who you're becoming. And 5 years from now, you could be exactly where you are right now, doing the same thing, having the same regrets, wondering what if, or you could be somewhere completely different. You could have built something. You could have changed your life. You could have stories to tell. You could have proof that you're capable of more than you imagined. But that only happens if you start, if you try, if you take the risk. And yes, you might fail, but you also might succeed. And isn't that possibility worth everything? Worth the fear, worth the doubt, worth the hard work, worth the sacrifice? Because what's the alternative? Playing it safe, staying comfortable, never knowing, never trying, never building, never creating, never living fully. And that's not really living at all. That's just existing. That's just going through the motions. That's just wasting the one life you have. So please, I'm begging you, if you have a dream, chase it. If you have a passion, follow it. If you have an idea, build it. If you have a voice, use it. If you have courage, act on it, because The world needs more people who are brave enough to try, more people who are willing to risk failure, more people who believe in themselves, more people who build things, more people who create, more people who inspire, more people who show that there's a different way, that you don't have to follow the conventional path, that you can build a life that's authentically yours. And when you do, when you finally take that leap, when you finally start building, when you finally chase that dream, and people laugh, let them laugh, let them doubt, let them tell you it won't work, because their laughter, their doubt, their certainty that you'll fail, that's just noise, that's just fear, that's just them projecting their own limitations onto you. And when you succeed, and you will succeed, if you work hard enough, if you stay focused enough, if you believe in yourself enough, when you prove them all wrong, don't gloat, don't punish, don't hold it over them. Be gracious, be kind, be generous. Show them that success doesn't have to change. You doesn't have to make you cruel. Show them that you can win without making them lose. Show them that there's enough success to go around, that someone else's achievement doesn't diminish yours. And maybe, just maybe, they'll learn from your example. Maybe they'll find their own courage. Maybe they'll chase their own dreams, and that ripple effect, that inspiration, that permission you give others to dream bigger, that's the real prize. That's the real success. That's what makes everything worth it. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And if this story resonated with you, if it inspired you, if it gave you even a tiny bit of courage to try to chase, to build, then please share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's at a crossroads. Share it with someone who has a dream that people are laughing at, because stories like this, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories about taking risks and succeeding, stories about proving doubters wrong, these stories matter. These stories change lives. These stories give people permission to try. And that permission, that inspiration, that courage we share with each other. That's how the world changes. One person, one dream, one risk at a time. So be that person, chase that dream, take that risk. And when you succeed, when you build something amazing, when you prove everyone wrong, remember where you came from, remember how hard it was, remember the doubt and the fear, and use that memory to help others, to inspire others, to lift others up, because that's how we build a better world. That's how we create more success, more fulfillment, more joy, not by hoarding it, not by gatekeeping it, but by sharing it, by inspiring it, by showing others what's possible. And that is my mission. That is my purpose. That is why I'm sharing this story, not to brag about my success, but to inspire yours, not to prove I'm special, but to show that I'm not, that I'm just someone who had a dream and the courage to chase it. And if I can do it, you can too. You absolutely can. And I believe in you. I'm rooting for you. I'm cheering you on. And I can't wait to hear your success story. Can't wait to see what you build. Can't wait to witness your transformation from dreamer to doer, from doubted to successful, from laughed at to celebrated. Because that story, that journey, that transformation is available to everyone, including you, especially you. So go chase your dreams. Bake your cakes, build your business, create your art, write your book, start your company. Do whatever it is that makes your soul come alive, because the world needs what you have to offer. The world needs your courage, your passion, your creativity, your unique perspective. And 5 years from now, when you're successful, when you've built something amazing, when people are celebrating what you've created, remember this moment. Remember when you decided to try. Remember when you chose courage over fear. Remember when you bet on yourself, and know that this moment, right now, this decision to take the leap, this is where it all began. This is where your story really starts. So make it a good one. Make it a brave one. Make it a story worth telling. And when people laugh, let them. Because you'll have the last laugh. You'll have the success. You'll have the fulfillment. You'll have the life you actually want. And that is everything. That is the whole point. That is what winning actually looks like. So go win. Go build. Go create. Go live. And thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having the courage to dream, because dreamers change the world, and you, yes, you watching this right now, you could be next.